Live Not by Lies. That's the latest book by Dreher, and just finished reading it. And I thought I'd do a quick book review and let you know what I've been reading. That's what I've been doing, posting these book reviews every Friday and whatever I'm happen to be reading this week, and make some recommendations. And I recommend this one. It was a very interesting book. I like Dreher. I don't agree with him on everything. I don't think there's anybody that I agree with on everything, but it was a very eye-opening book. It was an interesting book. Here's basically what Dreher is doing here. And he's written on these types of things before, but this one really has an interesting slant to it. Basically, and it comes in two parts. One, the first part, he kind of defines the problem, and then the second half of the book comes up with a solution, or at least what needs to be done is we push the resistance. He coins this term he calls soft totalitarianism that we have in America that's growing, and he sees it coming. This soft totalitarianism, which is a little different than hard totalitarianism, which is from the state. He defines soft totalitarianism as being a little different, not from the state, but from society, from the culture, from the academy, from corporations and things like that. And so he makes these connections with the hard totalitarianism of the former Soviet Union. And he explains their tactics and everything, and makes some very interesting parallels to the soft totalitarianism in American culture now. For example, most Americans would be horrified, are horrified about the surveillance state. The nanny state in China, where they got cameras and microphones everywhere, spying on you, on everything that you do. He said most Americans would say, "Oh, we don't want that." Yet, we pay to have Google and Amazon, Alexa, and all that listening to everything that we say. So, we're worried about Big Brother. What about Big Data? And so this surveillance, we're talking about the surveillance state. He talks about surveillance capitalism. And I think he was referencing somebody else that was using that terminology, surveillance capitalism. That's exactly what's taking place. And then in totalitarianism, which is a little bit different than, just a dictator. Well, you have it, the totalitarianism is about ideas, forcing ideas on people, and trying to get people to think differently, philosophically. And so it connects to like Brave New World, classic novel, and 1984. In 1984, if you've read that, where they try to get you to believe, 2 + 2 = 5. And they wear you down, break you down, so you believe 2 + 2 = 5. You might say, who would do that? That's not happening in America. Oh, yeah? Sure it is. Absolutely it is. Not by the state as much as I think the state's kind of complicit in it, but culture, not 2 + 2 = 5, but think about it. You got a male who is born a male, boy, a man, who is genetically male, chromosomally male, has the male biological plumbing, if you know what I mean. Yet, you're supposed to say he's a female, or she's a female, because they self-identify as such. 2 + 2 = 5. And if you don't say 2 + 2 = 5, or if you don't use the right pronoun for her, then you're ostracized, persecuted, and his prediction is it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Now, I'm not quite as much of a pessimist as Dreher is, but he makes some good points. And it's hard to argue against it. The one quibble that I would have, I guess, would be that he comes right out and say, I almost said that he sort of says, he actually comes right out and says, is the cultural war is over. We lost. We lost. And I don't know. I think that we need to keep fighting the culture war. I don't think that, see, his option, he actually never mentions the Benedict option, which was his earlier book. But there's some correlation there. And in the Benedict option, which I thought was a helpful book, I thought it was an interesting book. He diagnoses the problems well. The solution, if I understood him right, I would not really necessarily agree completely with, but I'm not really sure how far he's really meaning to push it. And if you hadn't read the Benedict option, basically he's saying that Christians need to sort of cloister. It's time to raise the white flag. We've lost the culture war. Now we need to cloister, and he uses the analogy of Noah's Ark. We need to just batten down the hatches and sort of create our own little world and ride it out, and then maybe one day we'll be able to emerge out into the sunlight again. I don't know about that. But in this book, he really doesn't push that as much, and he even uses the terminology of resistance. In the former Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc countries, that resistance that was there, that we can take and use what they learned from them that survived it in the gulags and everything else, and transfer it into our American context under soft totalitarianism. So some of those ideas are to preserve corporate memory. And if you think about it, that corporate memory of history and heritage is strongly under attack in today, in our culture, in the academy and media and everything else. So holding on to that, the importance of family, the church, and that small group, camaraderie there, encouraging each other, learning to suffer well. He says the worst thing that can happen to you is not that you suffer. And we need to understand that very Christian worldview there that he has. And so the second half of the book, I said the first half of the book kind of explains the problem, soft totalitarianism. And the second half, he actually goes to Russia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, places like that, and interviews these elderly people who lived through the Soviet communism and all the rest, and Christians. He talked to a lot of Baptists, which I thought was interesting. I'm a Baptist, and so and how did they make it through? And what were their tools of resistance for that, of survival? And more of a and this is what I was talking about a minute ago, more defensive than offensive. But whatever the case, to survive, and glean from that, and then transfers it over to how we, as Christians in America, ought to learn from them. And so it's a fascinating book. I won't take more of your time. I just want to make a quick video book review. I think it's a good book. I quibble with it just a little bit on certain things, but I think it's useful. I would highly recommend it. Open your eyes, especially if you're interested in those kind of culture war type of things. I think he has a great voice to speak into these whole discussions. So Rod Dreher, Live Not by Lies.